Hey everyone. So, unfortunately, Zena's not going to be able to join us tonight because they're not feeling well. So we'll try to make it through these segments, and we'll start with this one. You'll notice on this channel that we don't talk a ton about international news, and that's not because we don't care about it. It's usually because I don't feel super comfortable with talking about things that I don't really have a whole lot of knowledge about. And while I do have perspectives and ideas and thoughts, the reality of the situation is that I like to make sure that I'm not just putting my foot in my mouth just because I'm trying to create content. But occasionally something comes along that I do feel relatively capable of discussing. Not disgusting. Well, it is. What we're about to look at is disgusting. So before we hop into this, as a note, be aware of transphobia. Cool? Cool. So, Vladimir Putin calls trans acceptance crime against humanity. The Russian president made the remarks in a speech defending what he called spiritual values and historical traditions of his country. So, let's get into it.
Russian President Vladimir Putin called the movement for transgender acceptance a crime against humanity in a Thursday speech.
The humanity.
Putin, speaking at the annual meeting of the LiQWYD discussion club in Sochi, the city that hosted the 2014 Winter Olympics, said that to have children taught that a boy can become a girl and
Did it just die? What the hell?
Vice versa is on the verge of a crime against humanity, the Washington Post reports. He claimed supporters of transgender rights are pushing for an end to basic things such as mother, father, family, or gender differences.
So first off, I don't know why the robot voice changed. Go with it. Yeah, Putin is a crime against humanity. So already we know where this is going to go. Vladimir Putin is a person who is, by all rights, really well known for just incredibly awful things. It's pretty clear that, at least based on what I know, and I'm not an expert, is that it's likely he's kind of in that dictator category of people who, well, we had a free and fair election, it was really that I won 90% and the other guy sort of disappeared. He's also ex-KGB, is my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong. And yeah, he has been on the very strong push to make sure that Russia is as anti-gay and anti-trans as humanly possible. Not to mention, you should ask people in Russia about their experiences in therapy. Holy shit. Let's keep going and see what this D-bag said.
He called on his country, which is notorious for its persecution of LGBTQ+ people, to reject what he referred to as Western values. Russia should maintain its spiritual values and historical traditions, and avoid the socio-cultural disturbances of the West. Putin also railed against so-called cancel culture. Some in the West think the aggressive deletion of whole pages of their own history, reverse discrimination against the majority in the interests of minorities, constitute movement toward public renewal, he said. It's their right, but we are asking them to steer clear of our home. We have a different viewpoint.
So, again, I want you guys just to notice the dog whistles. I mean, the first one that stands out to me is if anyone's been paying attention to the whole Vosh Professor Flowers thing, or has dealt with tankies or any other issue, one of the big things is there's this rail against this made-up construct we call the West, which is essentially based on really dumb old systems of separating the West and East, and ignores a whole bunch of differences between different European countries, those who were in control, and so on. Yeah, Tiamat, we have someone in chat we should probably get rid of. We have YouTube chat. So, anywho, the simple fact of the matter is that when people talk about these social cultural disturbances, what they're talking about is this is some sort of social disease or contagion that's coming over here from this other place. It's pretty fucked. It's pretty weird. As for the idea of the idea of cancel culture, the idea of the minority, I guess, being discriminatory towards the majority. I mean, isn't that one? That's not how discrimination works, but go off, I guess. So yeah, it's kind of fucking weird. I find this really strange because what this is just pushing to the same thing we've been talking about a lot lately. That is, within various parts of society and various parts of discussions, there is a reoccurring trend of conservatism, anti-gay, anti-transness that seems to transcend different groups. It doesn't matter whether they're Russian or American Christians or the black community or whomever. There seems to be this undercurrent of belief that these are somehow things created to harm you, either from the West or, constructions from, white people or whatever the thing is. The idea that being gay or trans is not something that is inherent to you, but rather degeneracies that come from certain groups or whatnot. This is just fascist speak. Like, this is just fascist speak. This is what this is. And so it's a really weird thing to come to. The idea that we have a different point of view. Okay, so he's talking about the whole, we have a different opinion. The problem is his opinion is by all rights wrong. It ignores current and complete and utter, scientific and psychological consensus as far as, the plurality of data. That being that trans identities, including non-binary identities, are perfectly cool. No problem. No issue. They just exist. They are what they are. Let's keep going.
Russia infamously adopted a gay propaganda law in 2013, banning any mention of LGBTQ+ issues in venues accessible to minors. In recent years, Chechnya, a semi-autonomous region of Russia, has systematically persecuted LGBTQ+ people, especially gay men, jailing and torturing them, and outing them to intolerant family members, which puts them at risk of further violence. Some have been killed, and others have fled abroad. Matthew Sussex, a Russia expert at the Australian National University, told the Post that Putin's speech was a unifying message to his base, but it does hit the transgender and gay communities that the Russian government has continued to target.
Yeah, so notice that this is the reoccurring issue is that the two groups hit hardest within the LGBT are usually gay men and trans women. Now, you'll hear some transphobes say something to the effect about, they're the same thing. It's just not true. But the reality of the fact is actually there's a reason for that. And what it comes down to is essentially some version of misogyny, toxic masculinity, or transmisogyny, or some various mixture of all. What it essentially comes down to is the idea that men being sexual with men is somehow this terrible thing, this thing that causes harm at a spiritual or some kind of basic level. It's just not true. It's because of their attachment to the masculine archetype and paradigm, and because of that, anyone behaving outside of it is a problem. The idea of, say, an AMAB trans woman, the issue is that they refuse to accept her identity, despite the fact that it's, the way things simply are. But beyond that, if you then reduce her down to what they think she is, which is what, I guess just a man being feminine, then what that does is, there's really no difference at that point in their mind. This is the reason why, we went through this when we talked about the whole Dave Chappelle thing, is that the history of fascism and anti-gay, anti-trans stuff has been well worn, right? So a good example of this is that back then, we talked about this with the Institute of Sexology, right? They destroyed the damn thing, which we only know that everybody there who was on their files were called homosexuals, but it's very possible, and we have some data on this, is that this was people who were gay, bi, trans, but because the Nazis don't care about those distinctions, they don't believe in those distinctions, they're just all degenerates. This is the same kind of thing. When we talk about the fact that Putin or Xi Jinping or whomever is a fascist, they are fascists, this is what we mean. Fascistic behavior is always characterized, again, my favorite is Umberto Eco's 14 characteristics. They, by definition, point towards a certain thing, but you have to be intelligent with them. To me, they're very similar to criteria in the DSM-5. You have to look for enough of these to be able to start getting a trend of where this person's going. Someone doesn't have to say they're a fascist to be a fascist. So let's keep going.
Tatiana Stanovaya, head of R.Politik, a Russian think tank, wrote on Telegram that Putin's ideological spin, which is becoming more and more official and concrete, is the main aid to repressions, much stronger than any election. Also, speaking Thursday to former Donald Trump advisor Christian Whitten, Putin implied he would support a Trump run for U.S. president in 2024.
Of course he would.
Russia conducted a sweeping and unprecedented campaign to interfere in the 2016 presidential election, the Post notes, although Putin has denied he was involved. He and Trump, however, had something of a mutual admiration society.
So again, I want to be really clear on this. I'm just going to be very simple. The whole Russiagate thing that Republicans and dumbass lefties try to say wasn't real or never happened is nonsense. We know this based on data that Russia interfered with the 2016 election. We know this clearly. Anyone you ever hear say otherwise, by all rights, is not to be trusted. I'm sorry. I know that sounds really, really like black and white, but the simple fact is, if they tell you that this didn't happen, they are just lying. This is just cope at that point. Right? So, with that said, let's keep going. Whoop, didn't mean to highlight all that. Whoops, why did it do that? I can't highlight. I've forgotten how.
A Russian LGBTQ+ activist group responded to Putin's remarks in an email to The Advocate. Putin's speech in Sochi is a typical example of the Kremlin's traditional family values rhetoric juxtaposing Russia and the supposed West that is excessively demonized as decadent or lacking morals, especially when it comes to the subject of LGBTQ+ rights, said Dilya Gafurova, press secretary for charitable foundation Sphere, the operating organization for the Russian LGBT network. Of course, it is no surprise coming from the leadership of a country that legitimizes homophobic and transphobic attitudes through its legislature, a discriminatory LGBT propaganda law that is so vaguely formulated that being queer, being not manly or womanly enough in one's gender expression could mean that an LGBTQ+ person is propaganda by definition. In other words, there is an entire social group of people, the very Russian citizens, who are not only highly invisible and vulnerable, but whose needs and concerns are publicly ridiculed, as this incident demonstrates. Justifying that as a policy course, in that sense, fits the description of crime against humanity much better.
Yeah, so the thing is that, again, Putin's been doing this for quite some time. It's a continued push to make it so people are suppressed. And one of the biggest groups he wants to suppress is LGBT folks under the guise of tradition and spiritual purity or whatever other nonsense he pulls up. Remember, Russia interfered with the 2016 election. And regardless of whether you believe Putin was involved in that or not, I certainly do, but I can't prove anything. But the simple fact of the matter is it doesn't really matter if he was or not. It just doesn't. The fact is that him and Trump had a similar goal. That goal has been, and always will be, the fact is that they wish to harm LGBT people. We've gone over that article from LGBT Nation 1,000 fucking times that has shown the way in which Trump actively and completely with his cabinet targeted trans people, targeted gay people. The fact that right now there is a push in Texas to, which we'll talk about more later when I see more data, but where right now there's a push in Texas to attempt to make gay marriage not legal, right? There's like a direct stupid challenge. The fact that that exists is insanity, right? So I need everybody to understand this is when I talk about these people or talk about these situations, I need you to understand that this speech right here is not all that different from the things that were said by Trump or in regards to certain groups or certain things. The fact that Trump entertained Focus on the Family and various other like right-leaning Christian groups kind of shows the fact that even though he doesn't have to go out and say directly this stuff, it's very much the same thing because it's very convenient to have a target. And right now the target du jour was BLM beforehand and then also trans people. Now they're going after gay people, trans kids. There's always a target, and the purpose of it is suffering. It's to maintain power, it's to have a scapegoat, and it's to promote suffering. That's what they do. Right? So with that said, we'll leave this here. I'll see you next one.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. You can also ring the bell if you want to be notified of our videos. If you want to help the channel, you can donate at streamlabs.com/transgirltherapist/tip. You also can become a patron at patreon.com/transgirltherapist. For as low as $3, you can support our channel. Thanks for watching.